Carnegie Mellon computer science professor Randy Pausch recently gave a lecture that literally became an internet sensation on ABC.com. It was his last lecture as a professor, however, as he's dying of pancreatic cancer. He's been given 3 to 6 months to live and will leave behind his wife and 3 young children. In his moving talk, Really Achieving Your Childhood Dreams, Pausch shared his lessons learned and offered students his advice on how to achieve their own career and personal goals. After an appearance on Good Morning America, nearly 2,000 people wrote emails to Professor Pausch on all manner of life's questions. And we got some answers. Here's Dr. Pausch. With your passion for life and positive attitude, have you thought about the idea that the math may be wrong?
I certainly am not opposed to a miracle. And whether that's a miracle of the math being wrong or, pick your favorite flavor. I would love for my doctors to be saying to me, boy, we can't explain this at all, right? I'd love that. And certainly I've considered that, and I never give up hope. But having hope for something that you think is really, really unlikely to happen is not inconsistent with confronting the reality and doing the things you need to do with what is presumably a very small amount of time left. And I don't view those as being contradictory at all.
If you could ask a question to your lecture and website audience 30 years from now, what would it be?
Have you found a way to bring me back? How are the cyber implants going? Dang it, have you cured cancer? How are my kids doing? Are human beings still squabbling over the same stuff? I mean, I guess given the history, 30 years isn't very much delta to expect us to stop.
What would you do with the rest of your time on Earth if, in fact, your final curtain were delayed, let's say, 60 years?
Well, to some degree, I already had what I thought was a pretty good game plan, so to some degree I would go back and continue executing that. Family first and foremost, have the best job in the world, which I managed to pull off. I mean, being on the faculty at Carnegie Mellon gives me access to brilliant kids of all flavors, and the thing I chose to make hay out of there was to put the technologists and the artists together. I think I would have probably changed in the sense of the last year has made me really, really, really appreciate how silly it is to get mad about things. I mean, I was never one for anger, but over the last year I've just realized, getting mad because somebody cuts you off in traffic, okay, so they cut you off in traffic. You're going to be mad about that and, do 10 times much more stress to yourself for the rest of the day. So that kind of stuff would probably change.
If you could have chosen years ago to be given the knowledge that you would get this disease with its predicted outcome, would you have elected to be told?
Well, as an academic, I'm always inclined to say that, information is better than not having it. Answering this question in real time, I'm not quite sure. The question that really begs is, if you roll the clock back far enough, and I knew I was going to die, I'd be really questioning, would I have had children if I'd known that they were going to be at their current ages and I was going to die? I think that would be a responsible question that any thinking person would stare hard in the mirror. I'm not prepared to answer that in real time, but I think that would have been an awfully big question to ask myself. The thing that's related to this that I will absolutely say is that, would you rather get hit by a bus or get, a couple of months' notice? I don't like the physical pain part of this that comes at the tail end, but there's no doubt in my mind, speaking only for myself, that having a couple of months' notice is infinitely better than getting hit by the proverbial bus. And that's because it allows you time to sort of lessen the impact on others who are going to suffer consequences and do everything you can to make their life easier.
My mom passed away from pancreatic cancer in 1985 when I was a freshman in college. I can't seem to move on past her death. What will you tell your kids to do to learn to move forward without you?
First off, boy, I really feel for this person and don't think there's anything more top of mind than what I can do with my limited time to help my kids. That's an ongoing process. The thing I will say to anybody who finds himself in these kinds of circumstances is talking to people who provide professional counsel is absolutely essential, no matter who you are. You know, if I can do any good with this interview, if you look at me and say, hey, that guy seems to be handling this well, okay, we've talked to counselors, so you can too. And it's okay. It doesn't make you a weak person or a bad person. And we found it to be incredibly helpful. And, you know, there are a lot of things, obviously, trying to capture myself in video and writing letters to them and things like that, making things for them. Some of the most useful emails that I have gotten are from people who have said to me, you know, I lost my father at a young age, and here's what's helped me. Because who better would have an insight than somebody who went through that?
Because our past is tied so intricately to our future, do you feel that one's worth, even legacy, includes the regrets, brick walls succumb to, or does it matter at all in the scheme of things, in this universe, in this life?
Absolutely, somebody's legacy includes all the brick walls, the ones they got over and the ones they didn't, right? I didn't get into the NFL, and I talked about that in the lecture, as you know. But again, at Electronic Arts, I learned this wonderful expression: experience is what we get when we don't get what we wanted. And, you know, of course, part of our legacy is all the things we failed at, because failure is where most of the learning occurs. And so I like to tell my students, you know, if you're failing a lot, you're probably learning more per time unit than most of your peers. So don't get discouraged.
So often for the people left behind, particularly young children, it's the smaller details that they wish they could have asked you or would have known. Like, what was your favorite food or cartoon when you were growing up? Have you thought about how to let them know those details and who to turn to for those answers?
That's an absolutely brilliant and insightful question. And at the end of the day, like anything else in life, you throw your hands up and you say, yeah, I'm not going to get this 100% right. I know that my ace in the hole is that I have a lot of friends and a lot of family, and they are there. And they will tell the stories, and the wonderful part is they're not going to sugarcoat it, they're not going to deify me. They're going to say, oh yeah, you know, your dad, he was a character. Let me tell you about the time that, and that's really important because the kids need to know that stuff. And my wife and I have an incredible marriage, and she is an incredible woman, and we talk and we talk and we talk. So my hope is that the first line of defense, as it were, is that so many of the things and the little minutiae, and I think it's right, the minutiae sometimes are what people really want to know, my wife will tell them.
I have a 15-year-old son who has Asperger's syndrome, a form of autism. We have faced many challenges, and he's interested in designing video games. How would you suggest I light his fire and try to help him see his dreams are possible?
So, speaking directly to Donna's son, what I would say is there are places you can go and get schooled and learn how to make video games. Carnegie Mellon happens to have a really good center. If you've seen my lecture, it got talked about a little bit. The Entertainment Technology Center at Carnegie Mellon is a place where you can go and learn how to do this in an academic setting, and it's on the web at etc.cmu.edu. And to her son, I would say, you have Asperger's, and that's something you're going to have to deal with. I taught a course called Building Virtual Worlds. One of my favorite students in that course had Asperger's and managed to get through that course and be part of some really cool projects. And one of the things she learned during that course was that trying to hide what she had to cope with wasn't her best strategy, and being open with other people for her in that context did work. I'm not necessarily sure that's advice I would give everybody. That's not my place to give. But the message I want to send to you is that, you know, I had a student with Asperger's, and that student did just fine. And, you know, you should go out and do what you want to do too.
What do you feel the difference is between heading in the wrong direction versus heading in the right direction, and knowing which brick walls you're supposed to break through?
That is a really great question, and it boils down to the essence of how do you spend your time and effort? Because, yes, sometimes the right thing to do is to realize that there is this thing that I'm not going to be able to bust through, and how do I modify where I'm going to go after next? And part of the answer is it's so circumstance specific, but one of the ways you know is when you say, I have really tried to break through this brick wall. I have really given an effort. I've done more than kind of lean against it and, kind of hang out there for 5 minutes, seeing if the weight of my body is enough to topple it over. If you've banged into that brick wall to the point where you got bruises all over your head and shoulder, and some of the finest people are pulling you aside and saying, what is exactly on the other side of this brick wall? Because I know another thing that might bring you exactly the same happiness and satisfaction, and that brick wall's got some cracks in the mortar. That's a good time for that discussion, but it's clearly a tough balance. But if you don't hurt, you may not have tried enough. And if you do hurt, you may have learned a lot by the attempt, so your time may not have been in vain.